But what's so damaging about narcissistic abuse is that you are dealing with a human being, one of these malignant narcissists,
Right.
who is really using every tactic they possibly can, whether it's physical abuse, verbal, psychological, financial abuse, sexual abuse, legal abuse. They will do all this gaslighting, manipulation. They will go to any means necessary to fulfill their ego, to feel that entitlement and that sense of importance that they see. Yeah.
This is Audley Stevenson here, and welcome to the Audacious Living Podcast, where we believe in living life to the fullest and embracing audaciousness in all aspects. I'm thrilled that you're here to join us on our journey as we inspire, empower, and motivate our listeners to live their best audacious lives ever. Today, we have the privilege of speaking with Diaz, a courageous individual who's overcome the challenges of narcissistic abuse and is now dedicating herself to helping others in similar situations. Dana shares her inspiring story and offers valuable insights into recognizing and addressing narcissistic relationships. So without any further ado, here is my conversation with Dana Diaz. Enjoy. Hey, Dana, thank you for joining me here today on the Audacious Living Podcast. It is such a pleasure to have you, and I appreciate you making the time like this.
Well, thank you for having me, and thank you for being patient through our technical difficulties, but we got here. We're having this conversation.
That's it. As you said, the most important thing is that the conversation still is happening.
Exactly.
Regardless what, gremlins are floating around in our systems, we are here. That's all that matters.
Yes.
So I certainly looking forward to this conversation with you. I know sort of the general sort of is under the umbrella of narcissistic abuse and
Yes.
sort of the impacts that have on us. And I know through your own personal stories and experiences, you've got a background and understanding a little bit about the narcissism as a topic, and maybe as a starting point. So I'd love to get in your story, obviously, but and perhaps if you sort of maybe start off with sort of a definition when we talk about narcissism and narcissistic individuals, what we're talking about, and more just to kind of frame it for those who may not fully understand. I think it's one of those things. It's out there. I know that, but let's on an equal playing field, if you will.
Yeah, absolutely. Because it is a word that's thrown around so casually anymore, and
Right.
it kind of gnaws at me that people just throw it out there randomly. And unfortunately, it's a very complex thing to describe. People spend decades studying this, but on a very basic, simplistic level, a narcissist is somebody who has to feel or thinks they actually are superior and much more important than others and deserving of extra special treatment, exceptions, rules don't apply to them, et cetera, et cetera. But there's different types of narcissists as
Right.
well. They go about achieving this sense of importance in different ways. So the way that I always think is more, the most relatable for people to understand narcissism is like tumors. You have benign tumors and malignant tumors. Your benign tumors are there. They're not going to bother you, though. Right. Your malignant tumors are going to cause you some problems. They might kill you. And, you probably want to remove them. So that's what we're dealing with. So when we're talking about narcissistic abuse, it's when a narcissist abuses you. But what's so damaging about narcissistic abuse is that you are dealing with a human being, one of these malignant narcissists,
right,
who is really using every tactic they possibly can, whether it's physical abuse, verbal, psychological, financial abuse, sexual abuse, legal abuse. They will do all this gaslighting, manipulation. They will go to any means necessary to fulfill their ego, to feel that entitlement and that sense of importance that they see. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. No, and it's interesting. The traits can sprout out, and they're and I'm glad you're talking about those different forms. It comes out in different ways because you might see something, go, oh, is that? But it may not be, but then it could be at the same time. And so
Right.
I guess my point is it's not easy to spot as people might think it is.
Exactly. And the thing is you can have narcissistic qualities, but doesn't mean you're a narcissist or not a malignant narcissist that's abusing people. Because as a matter of fact, I mean, they actually say it's very common for kids who, or adults that have survived child abuse to exhibit narcissistic qualities in adulthood.
Right.
But it's not to achieve this sense of importance or abuse other people with it. It's done more for them to achieve their own sense of self-esteem,
feel good about themselves
in a weird way. Yeah. So, I mean, you can have the qualities, but I know narcissists that aren't bothering anybody with it. You can almost laugh at how ridiculous they are, and they're just so into themselves. Like, I wish I had that level of self-esteem. But then some of them, you're like, yeah, you're right. You look as good as you think you do. So you can't hate on that,
Sure. And again, I think for some, it's and so I'm glad you sort of touched on that, because narcissism generally has a negative stigma attached to it, right?
Yes.
But it isn't all bad.
No, the bad stuff is the abuse. It's these malignant narcissists, and that's what we're going to be talking about. So to say somebody's a narcissist just because somebody feels good about themselves and whatever, they have that healthy self-esteem, it does not mean that they're a bother. So we're talking about people, and you can put a label on it, but at the end of the day, abuse is abuse. And if you're going to intentionally cause harm to a human being, it's not right.
Yeah. Fantastic point, Dana. Fantastic point. So perhaps then let's sort of get into your story and kind of how you became an expert on this topic.
By unfortunate experience. I was born to a teenage mother back during a time when that wasn't okay. She hadn't wanted me. Obviously, she went through a lot of ridicule and shame being pregnant so young. But she had me. Here I am. She ended up marrying a man who, I always say he's like the king of all narcissists. He's one of these, it's what you call an overt narcissist, where this is somebody that's going to tell you. They don't try to manipulate you into praising them. They're telling you that you need to praise them. He's the best. He knows everything. He has everything that you should envy him for, one of these people.
Not a whole lot of humility. Not a whole lot of
humility. No, none at all. Not the least bit. But unfortunately, he chose to physically and verbally abuse me because I was not his child. And so, you have me from the time, I think she was with him since I was a year old. So, I mean, really, he's the only male father figure I had growing up. Right. But this man would tell me as far back as I could remember that nobody ever wanted me. Nobody ever loved me. He shouldn't have to pay for another man's child. I'm a burden. I'm stupid, I'm this, I'm that, just there was nothing positive that was coming out of his mouth where I was concerned. Right. My mother, unfortunately, because there was this emotional detachment with me, she was not, willing to really step in and defend me. As a matter of fact, she would turn her head to it or tell me that I must be lying to get attention. Just wanted to negate my whole experience. So, I didn't know what gaslighting or narcissism was, but it was happening to me right from a young age. And then the physical abuse, we all know what that is, started with little things. And that's how narcissists work. They start with the little stuff, it might've been when he was putting ponytails in my hair, just pulling my hair too hard, kind of yanking too hard where it hurt. And I would yell out. But then by the end, when I was a teenager, about 17 years old, we got to the point of strangling and throwing downstairs and some rougher stuff. But unfortunately, the physical stuff, I don't know why. I feel bad because some people have it so much worse, but as bad as it was, it didn't affect me as much as the verbal. Right. I knew it was wrong. I would stand up for myself. But at the end of the day, by the time I left the house, which I did as soon as I legally could, in my first year of college, I went out into the world, and I had apparently internalized all these negative things that he had said to me all those years. So I felt incompetent and incapable and stupid, and I wasn't skinny enough, and I wasn't nothing was ever good enough. So that is how I fell for this person that I ended up with for 25 years. As a matter of fact, when he walked into my life, I did not like him. He reminded me of my stepfather, and I wanted to run in the other direction. But at the same time, I was so starved for love that, I just tried to make it work. I forced it.
The internalization of sort of the abuse that you're receiving, like I think like as a child you don't know better, right? As a child you don't know, especially from an adult figure that's sort of charged for your responsibility and care, and so there's a natural sort of trust and even belief to a certain degree, and so you haven't developed the wherewithal to challenge what you're being told about yourself. And so it would seem to me that internalization is really the only thing that you can do, or the only option to take.
Yeah, like you said, I don't think you know any better. I mean, if this is the narrative around you day in, day out, years and years and years. And, the other aspect of this is people do have to recognize that back in that time, it's not, this was in the 1970s, 1980s. This is not 2023 like it is today. I was born to an unwed mother. So I am going to school. I mean, I'm talking first grade, second grade, little. I was a little girl having other kids tell me that they're not allowed to play with me because I'm a bastard child. Their mom and dad said they can't even talk to me. My teachers are talking about me, referring to me as an illegitimate child. Our neighbors in our neighborhood, I remember one wouldn't give me candy on Halloween when we were trick-or-treating because I was a bastard child and I apparently didn't deserve candy. So, I mean, everywhere I turned, there's something wrong with me. I was treated like I was less than everybody else. I wasn't worthy. So when I'm growing up in this, how would I ever think that I was any different? There's no way. Nobody ever spoke positivity into me.
Right. And so was it just accepted, or what was the response from you, or was there one?
I was a very strong-willed, little fiery little girl. I think it's just part of my spirit and who I am. But unfortunately, when, and again, we're talking about a time back then, if you spoke up, you got slapped. You spoke up, you got spanked. So this is another issue with the physical abuse, because back then it was acceptable to hit your kids. And I mean, even, I hate to say, you got a good beating sometimes, but that's why I think they thought at that generation of parenting, I think they thought that was acceptable because, to take it a little further, because it was just like, oh, well, Dana's just being sensitive because she can't take that we beat her with the phone when she tried to call for help, or, it was just deemed okay. Like you had to toughen up and just deal with it. But there is a line that gets crossed between spanking, slapping, and strangling your daughter and throwing her downstairs. I mean,
it's abuse. Abuse is
yeah,
abuse.
exactly.
We can mask it and we can cover it up, and we can say it's, for scolding or discipline, whatever words, but abuse is still abuse, and I have to deal with that as a child. It's just not right.
Exactly. And that's the thing. I always knew it wasn't right. I was the little girl that, even though I was a tiny little peanut, I would stand up for the other kids on the playground that would get bullied. And then I would get it, I would get that too, because teachers, again, it was a different time. Teachers would see kids getting into physical scuffles on the playground, and they'd let it happen. They'd stand there and smoke their cigarettes and act like it was just another day, because it's not, these days you can't even look at a kid the wrong way, never mind put your hand on them. But, it was a different time.
Yeah. So let's sort of fast forward a little bit. I mean, you sort of get through that, as a teenager. When did you sort of put it all together of what happened to you as a teenager or a child growing up?
I mean, I knew early on, but it was somewhere around 10, 12 years old,
Okay.
that I knew absolutely. I learned to keep my mouth shut because opening my mouth, had consequences.
Right.
And I knew I couldn't say anything to anybody outside our home because who was going to believe me? And even if they did, again, I would be, my mother, I would hear her on the phone, even with family or whoever, creating this whole narrative about, you know, I'm difficult.
Right.
If I spoke up, I was difficult. If I cried, I was sensitive. If I stood up for myself, I was rebellious. It was me. And again, it's putting that burden of that shame on me, and the blame was on me. Everything was my fault. So I knew it was wrong, but I just decided, like, I knew how to manage it. I had to fly under the radar. So I tried to fly under the radar as much as I could, but I'm a human being. You can only take so much. So sometimes I would, erupt and, just start screaming, like, why don't you care about me? Why can't you love me? And it would not have good consequences. That's usually when the physical stuff got really bad. But I just kind of made a vow to myself, I'm just going to get out of here. As soon as I'm 18, I'm walking out of this house and I'm done with it, and I'm going to put it in the past. But
Mhm.
unfortunately, the past followed me right out of that house because I carried all that,
Naturally. Right.
stuff that I internalized about who I was and where my place was in the world. And I didn't realize back then, but looking back, I was obviously a people pleaser because I just was so desperate for somebody to see some value in me and to see something, just to even like me.
Right.
So yeah, this guy walks into my life. I think he's a jerk. I don't like him. He seems entitled. He wants servitude. And I'm like, oh, heck no. Been there. I know that kind of personality, not happening. But you know what? I had nobody else was interested. I was lonely. I thought, well, maybe it is me. Maybe I'm being too picky. Maybe I'm being too judgmental. Maybe I'm not giving him a chance. So I did. And unfortunately, I gave him 25 years of chances. But the thing about
Mhm.
narcissism that people don't get is, as much as these people can be, so cruel and remorseless,
Right.
um and inconsiderate and all these things. And my ex was angry. He had these violent outbursts, but there was also all of this good stuff. Nobody, and I don't care who you are and how desperate you are or what you've been through, nobody's going out there trying to date like Freddy Krueger or Chucky. We are not like running out on the street like, oh, look at this maniac running around with a butcher knife, I want him. No. These are nicely dressed,
Yep.
they have good hygiene, they're charming, they're funny, other people like them very much. They can even be very giving and charitable and all these wonderful things. So you fall for that, they lure you in, and then they show you who they really are.
Right.
And then throughout this time, there's this constant push and pull where the bad stuff happens, but then they apologize and they love you, and it's you and them forever, and it's you and this person against the world, and you're the one, and they caress your face softly, and they buy you flowers and all these things.
Yeah.
And then the bad stuff happens, and then you start to question it again, and then they say all the stuff so that they lure you back in, and
Right.
you have
Right.
this hope that things are going to be better this time. And then it just keeps going back and forth. But every time this bad stuff happens, it's kind of like in my childhood, it was just a little bit worse each time.
Yep.
So
Yep.
by the time you get to the end, you're like, how did we get from point A to point B without me noticing?
Yep.
Because it happened in little bitty increments. It
Yep.
got worse just in little increments, to where you saw it, but it wasn't so drastic
Right.
that you would run in the other direction and walk away.
And then the enticement is also quite strong too, and the sorries and all that associated with
Yeah,
that
you
to
believe
make it,
it.
yeah, you buy into it. But really, what you're doing is you're sort of getting back on the ride and going through that cycle again, right? And it's just,
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, I always said it felt like being on a hamster wheel because I kept running away, but I was always in the same darn place. Always, no matter how fast I tried to run. I always found myself in the same place. And it's frustrating because you, again, you know it's wrong.
yeah,
And you don't want it to be that way. But for all the people who say, oh, well, I wouldn't put up with that. And I would, you say that, but let me tell you, how many times did this man cheat on me? A lot. I don't even know how many. I stopped asking. I stopped wondering. How many times did he do this or that? When your life is meshed with somebody, then you have a child, you have a house together, your families are intertwined.
Well, you
all
get
this
deeper and
stuff of
deeper in,
life.
right? You get deeper and deeper in, and then it's the
Yeah,
entanglement is that much
exactly.
difficult to break apart.
Yeah, it's a nice idea to just say, yep, I'm done, I'm out, see you later,
Right.
taking my kid, peace out. No, it doesn't work that way in the real world, so you stay because you have an investment, and your lives are enmeshed, and you have a commitment. Whether you've gotten married or not, you have a commitment with this person and you want it to work. Nobody gets in a relationship for it not to work out. And the fact that they do have this side of them that they show everybody else, they're capable of it.
Mhm.
So you're trying it almost, even that is manipulative in itself because you see how they are with everyone else. So you think it must be you because you are the only one that brings out this,
Gotcha.
other aspect of
You start
them.
questioning yourself, right? You're the problem.
Right. You start doubting yourself and your perceptions of, and here's again where this manipulation and gaslighting comes in. And then you top that with all the threats, the threats of, if you try to leave, I'm going to make sure you never see your kid again. My mom has all the money for the best lawyers. The financial stuff, not allowing access to joint checking accounts. Like my ex drained his 401k completely and our home equity. So there was no money anywhere except for whatever I had, which I started learning I had to sock it away without him knowing because what else could I do? So there's all these overwhelming, things coming at you from every different direction. And then on top of it, when there's a kid involved, you're trying to submit on purpose now, even though you're not a submissive person, because you just want peace for your child. You want your child to have some sense of normalcy. But like our son stopped even having his friends over because he was embarrassed, the tension and the hostility and the outbursts and everything happening in the house. And he couldn't have a normal childhood. And he became more withdrawn because he didn't want to participate or have to witness anything or hear anything.
Of course.
He didn't want to have to take a side. So it creates a whole mess of, overwhelm, trying to manage all this and stay sane and safe. Because when this person is starting to threaten you in the midst of all this, now you have a very dangerous situation.
Yeah. So it leads to the question, Dana, at what point, did you realize that you absolutely had to leave that situation?
Well, I know what the point was, but the sad part is it wasn't when he swung a crowbar at my head. It wasn't when we had a prescription medication situation where he dragged my body into the bathroom hoping that I would die of an overdose. It wasn't when he told our neighbors that he planned to kill me because he wanted me dead. You would think these things would make me want to leave. No. It was when, actually it was, I'll never forget, at the end of 2018, I just had gotten so ill. I started to lose my basic abilities. For example, I always use this as an example because I think people need to understand I could not tear toilet paper from the roll. So here I am in my early 40s thinking, if I can't even take care of my basic needs, hygienically, like, is this what my life has come to?
Right.
I could barely breathe. I was having neurological issues, cardiovascular, muscular, digestive. I mean, my whole body was giving out on me. And then within a 2-week period, I had dropped 15 pounds. I was down to 93 pounds at 40 some years old. I mean, no, that's not healthy. That's not okay.
Right.
So the doctors ran all these tests. Long and short of it, Mayo Clinic decides to run a cortisol test. Cortisol is a stress hormone. They called me back. They said, we have to redo the test because we got the results and there's no way the results are this high. We think we compromised the samples. Okay, redid the test. Well, guess what? My levels were that high. The levels should have been somewhere between 1 and 600, and all of my levels were over 2,500. So they said, you have been enduring so much stress over so much time. Your body thought it had to eradicate some sort of virus or like a cancer, that it started killing itself. So my white blood cells had depleted to the point where I became autoimmune. I was having all these autoimmune reactions, and I developed a lung disease that is actually common in victims of abuse. The doctor says it's like having COPD and fibromyalgia all at once because I have the symptoms of all of them. So I was very sick. They said that my body was shutting down because all of my organs were just basically barely, at base survival rates, because my body was doing all it could just to breathe and keep my heart beating.
Right.
And they said, we could throw pills at you for all your symptoms, or maybe you should just change your circumstances. That was the polite way of saying, we can't be liable for saying this to you, but you need to get a darn divorce.
Right. Right.
But I'm a faithful person. I'm a Christian. I made a vow. I felt like it, it was my duty.
And all of those things, aren't those sometimes our downfall? Like, we're committed to these notions and committed to these commitments, and not that they're not noble. Please, I'm not suggesting there's anything wrong with staying true to your word. That's not where I'm going with this. But certainly understand that when we tie ourselves to these types of commitments, there are repercussions.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I had talks with my priests, and they reassured me that God didn't want me to suffer. And people, there are a lot of people that are not faithful and they wouldn't understand, but I was born and raised, in the church. So for me, it was important, and everybody has considerations, so you take in the family, the child. I don't want to break up my son's family unit. I don't want to, my faith, all these things, finances, like, where are we going to go? What are we going to, I did think I was doing the noble thing by staying. I thought, well, maybe this is my sacrifice. But at the same time, I thought, I don't want to die, and either he's going to kill me because he wanted me dead, or I am going to die of being in this, the doctors can call it chronic stress, but I mean, it was a little more serious than chronic stress.
Absolutely. No question about that.
That was my breaking point. That was when I decided I'm done. I need to move on. I actually remember laying in it. I didn't even lay in bed. I laid on a couch in the basement. I was sleeping in the basement because I didn't want to be anywhere. I didn't trust him to sleep and be vulnerable next to this man who wanted me dead. So I just said to myself, what does Dana want? If Dana could envision her life, what does Dana want? And I had very clear answers. I had gone to school for journalism. I'd never had a chance to write because he hadn't allowed me to have a career where I had a sense of achievement or success. I couldn't be any more than what he wanted me to be, which was nothing. Right. So, I had accommodated all of his requests over the years, and I just decided, even traveling, I wanted to travel. Well, he wouldn't even let me go to Florida to my great grandma's funeral. He didn't see fit that our money should be spent for me to just randomly travel, and I just thought there's
That's
more
a
to
control
life.
thing. Yeah, that's a
Oh
control thing.
yeah, very controlling.
Oh,
So
boy.
I just said, yeah, I'm done. This is what I want my life to look like. I don't want to just die in this awful
course.
situation and then that's it. And that's all my life was meant for, because I felt like there was more and I knew that I deserved more.
Well,
I just had not allowed that self-respect to really
Right.
surface prior to that. But that was it for me. I just had to be done.
I want to acknowledge and the fact that you got to the point that you did. I would imagine there's a lot of people who don't get there and who
Right.
stay and don't make that decision for their own well-being. So I would imagine you had to devise a plan. I don't see him saying, "Okay, you want to leave? Go ahead." Right. So I would imagine there was a plan
Right.
in play.
Well, there was a plan. I just figured, let me first talk to an attorney, figure out what divorce looked like. So I had that information and could plan accordingly. So I had that meeting with an attorney in February of 2020. And I was given some homework, a few things I had to take care of, in order to file. And guess what happened a week or so after that? COVID pandemic. Yes, the shelter in place. So now not only could I not file for divorce, the courts were closed, everything was closed, nobody was working, and I'm stuck in the house with this man.
Yeah.
So
And you're
that
actually
was
in
a
a
fun
worse
time.
situation because you can't get out. Right. We're all
I
sequestered.
literally could not get out. So that's when I started keeping a record in a notebook of everything that was happening. I needed for my own peace of mind to just have something that if something happened to me in that house that was made to look like an accident, or if we got
Right.
into a squabble and something happened, I needed to make sure that somebody would find this notebook and know that he was the culprit.
Gotcha.
Because
You've been
unfortunately,
listening to
nobody
the
outside the
Audacious
home
Living
really knew.
Podcast,
I
hosted
mean, he
by
couldn't go
Audley
telling
Stevens.
anybody, because just like my mother and stepfather, he had created this narrative, with people that, oh, she's unstable, she's an unfit mother, all these things. Yet he would leave me to, raise our son pretty much by myself. So,
Yeah.
I mean, I knew he was lying, but he he was very convincing because people trusted him, and he was reliable in so many other ways. They had no reason not to. So I kept this notebook hidden in the basement where I basically lived at this point, kept it under the couch cushion. And at one point during COVID, during the shelter in place, I started thinking, you know what, I'm going to elaborate on it. I am a writer. I have some time on my hands. So I took these little summaries out of the notebook and developed them into the full stories of what had happened. And before I knew it, once we got out of COVID, I was able to file for divorce and what have you. But I turned my notebook into a book because I realized once I was divorced and got out in the world, I had no idea that this narcissistic abuse was a thing, that other people experienced it. I thought I was the only one.
Yep.
But mostly it was the fact that I got sick from it, that I felt a responsibility to other victims, that I needed to tell them, like you were saying before, you think you're doing a noble thing, you think you're there for your kids, or you invested this time and you're hoping to make it work, but you can actually get very, very sick, and possibly not be alive for those kids, and not be, nobody really understands that all these things that these abusers do, even if he'd never laid a hand on me, he could have killed me just by, me enduring all this chronic stress. So that's what I did. But it did get most violent, unfortunately, after the divorce. Narcissists do not like to let anybody go. so it got really rough. So we had some situations where I did have to call the police. The authorities unfortunately did not do anything. So I was left basically to fend for myself. But fortunately, in this day and age, we have Blink cameras and Ring doorbells and all kinds of things that, once you put them up, they usually, inhibit some of that behavior, because nobody wants to be caught on video doing the things that they're trying to do to you.
Yeah, no, as a way of holding him accountable, right? And so I get that, and I'm happy to hear that you got to this side, and the way you get to this side is through your book. And if you give us the title there, because I think it's important, to the fact that you chronicle your story the way you did. What's the title of the book?
Yeah, absolutely. It's called Gasping for Air: The Stranglehold of Narcissistic Abuse. And it's a reference to my lung disease, but also it references what it feels like to be in that situation. And I'm really fortunate that in writing the book and having to relive those experiences in such great detail and thinking about them to the depth that I had to be able to verbalize the experiences, I was able to not only acknowledge and accept what had happened, but I gained perspective, on myself, on him, the situations, how we got there. And I think all that understanding helped me forgive myself so that I could heal from it. So, I mean, there was no better therapy for me than writing this book. And I'm grateful that, I had said from day one, if one person, saves themselves from a similar situation, then my work is done. And I have had many, many people reach out to me to say that they had the strength after reading my book. And so that's why I do these podcasts, and that's why I keep writing, is because I want people to see, it's been just 3 years since.
And that's not a long time ago.
It's not a long time, but I want people to see that I am still standing.
Yes.
I don't even know the last time I used my oxygen machine. I am healthy. I have gained my weight. I don't have the symptoms like I used to have, and I'm happily remarried to somebody that actually likes me and reciprocates the love I give, and he respects me. But you know what I want people to take from this is how words are so powerful.
Yes.
My whole life, 40 some years, from the time I was born and through my marriage, my previous marriage, I was demeaned, insulted, degraded, put down, negative, negative, negative. I am now with this amazing husband that I have who is so positive. He smiles at me. I didn't have that before. It sounds so simple. He speaks positively to me.
Oh, beautiful.
Even when we disagree, he respects my opinion. He respects my perspectives, and we can still disagree and be okay with each other. Just say, oh, well, I don't see it that way. This is how I see it. It's called a healthy relationship.
That's
where
right.
somebody is uplifting you and encouraging you.
That's right.
I never had this before. And I think that it just literally, pun intended, speaks so much to the fact that words can have that power, because they have made me, being in this positive environment now, I have achieved more than I thought I could. I have reached the potential I thought I had, plus some, in health, in spirituality, in love, in every way, and now I am, exploring this career as a writer, and I'm doing so well. I just hope that people can take that and really think about the words that they say to other people, because the positivity goes so far in affecting other people's lives.
No, they do matter. And it's such an important point. I'm glad you made that, because we sometimes downplay the significance of the words and not
Yes.
being more positive than we can be. And it does make a big difference. I particularly love, there's so much aspects of your story that I absolutely love, getting through it, the lessons learned, overcoming,
Yes.
but staying on the other side and wanting to help others is a really big part of this for you. And I think that's, that's amazing. So on that theme of, helping others, for individuals that might be in relationships that are, or they might be in a similar relationship, or maybe not as similar, but there's signs of, how do you know that you're in one of these types of relationships?
Well, I have a quiz on my website if anyone wants to take it,
Okay.
danasdiaz.com. There's a narcissistic abuse quiz, but this is what I tell people. This is my very simple answer.
Okay.
Listen to your gut. If something
Mm,
doesn't feel right, it's probably not. I mean,
mm,
it's as simple as that. I think, you know, when you meet people, you click with some and you don't with others. Some people you meet, you feel like you can finish each other's sentences. You're
sure.
like-minded. It's like you've known each other forever, but you just met. Other people you like, and you can develop this and that, and other people you just don't, vibe with at all. But I think we try so hard, especially in romantic relationships, to force things to work
Sure.
that don't work.
Sure. Particularly the stage of
So
life, depending what stage of life you're in too, right? Like
exactly. Well,
people
there's so
do.
many factors. Yeah.
Yes, for
I
sure.
mean, my childhood affected me back then, but now I would look at, having been through the previous marriage and everything I learned, I'm in a different place now. I chose much better this time, but fortunately, who I'm married to now, I did actually know for a very long time. I knew his family for like 15 years. So there was already this very
Right.
strong basis for us. It
Wonderful.
wasn't just like I met him at a bar and we ran out and got
Sure.
married,
Sure. No, no, I understand. No,
So, but yes, I think that we need to just listen to ourselves. And if somebody doesn't feel right, just something, even if you can't put your finger on it, it's not right. If somebody says something that disturbs your peace,
right.
bothers you, don't try to excuse it or talk yourself out of it. Listen to yourself. And what bothers you may not bother me, and vice versa. So I think it's just a matter of really just being in touch with what you're willing to tolerate and
Right.
not, and what kind of standards you expect out of somebody in a situation, and follow that. Don't be shy, and don't invalidate yourself by accepting anything less than what you do deserve.
Amazing. Amazing. That's a great point. The last thing that I wanted to ask you about is with respects to that building up process. Obviously, leaving that situation is paramount. That's first and foremost. You
Yes.
do that, but there's some residue that's left behind. It doesn't just
Yes.
go away when you're out of the situation. There's
No.
residue that's left behind. There's work that needs to be done. What does that process look like, or what it looked like for you?
It's nasty and ugly, and I'm not going to sugarcoat it. When it happens, it's not nice, but it's involuntary. It's happening and you're experiencing it. But when you're trying to get past it, you have to confront it head on. I mean, it's like sticking your hand straight in the lion's mouth, knowing you're going to get bit.
Right.
You're not going to escape it unscathed. So you have to be prepared for it. What I always tell people too is, don't go into it until you're ready. And whether you're ready right away or it takes you 5 or 10 years to be ready, just get yourself right first.
Right.
Like for me, getting myself right meant taking care of Dana. I wanted to paint my toenails red because that just made me happy, and, you know, made my eyes twinkle a little when I looked down at them. And I wanted to have butter pecan ice cream for dinner. So I ate a whole darn pint instead of eating real food. And whatever it is,
Right.
I go for a walk in nature. Take care of you, because if you do these things to fill your heart with joy and fill your soul with good stuff, you're going to be in a better mind space
Yes.
to confront all those demons of your past. And when you're able to confront them, feeling, kind of more substantial, you've built yourself back up a little, you're standing a little stronger on your own 2 feet.
Yep.
You'll do much better with it than if you try to do it from a place of still feeling, all these negative things about yourself. You just really got to take care of you first. But healing is a wonderful thing, if and when you're ready. And there's so many different options. I did writing therapy.
Yep.
There is art therapy and music therapy and whatever it is. But the things that you can do for you, you can do for free. Go take a walk. Go buy a new outfit. Go whatever. Go play basketball with your buddies. Whatever it is, fill your heart with joy because you deserve it. And that's going to help you more than anything else that you do.
Amazing. And you're right. I do appreciate the fact that you identified that there's different things that we can do for ourselves. And so really that's because of a very individualized journey, right?
Yes.
So I think that's key. Dana, thank you so much for being here and sharing the manage you did. I very much appreciate the vulnerability and the openness in terms of telling, all parts of your story, the dark parts as well. I mean, I think those are important for individuals to hear. So I appreciate that you're doing that. Give us your website again for our listeners who want to connect with you and learn more about your work.
Yeah, absolutely. It's danasdiaz.com. It's DANASDIAZ.com. Links to Facebook and Instagram are on there too. Link to my book is on there. I have a blog. I have this podcast will be on there with all the others I've done. So, I definitely want people to explore the resources that are out there, and if you know somebody in a situation that you think might benefit, share this podcast with them. It's probably more likely they'll listen to this than if you handed them my book or something. So, it might spark some thought and they might rethink what they're going through. But yeah, I really appreciate everybody's support in this and just ask everybody to be kind, consider your words. And if somebody does come to you and confide that they're in a situation, just be there for them and listen and help them to find the resources they need to get out.
Absolutely. That's a fantastic point. Dana, thank you once again. This has been awesome. Really appreciate the time with you and take care.
Thank you. You too.
Back we are here on the podcast, and much thanks and appreciation goes out to Dana for being here and sharing her very, very powerful story. And on Dana's story, it really reminds us of the power of resilience and the importance of self-care. Even in the face of adversity, she found the strength to prioritize her well-being and pursue a life filled with joy and fulfillment. It's a powerful reminder that we all have the capacity to rise above challenges and create a life that aligns with our truest desires. So thank you, Dana, and thank you to our listeners for being here and joining us here on the Audacious Living Podcast. As you go about your day, remember to prioritize self-care and to listen to your inner voice while embracing that audacious spirit within you. Until next time, stay safe, be kind, show love to one another, and be audacious.